Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. The topic of the video is going to be on assembling my new drum sander. It's a Supermax 2550, and the meaning of its name is that the drum itself is 25 inches long. So if you want, you can make a single pass up to 25 inches and you're done, or say you have a 50-inch wide tabletop. You can run that through. One end will hang out of the cantilevered side of the sander, and then you can rotate it around and then sand the other half. So it's a very versatile sander that gets you a huge capacity in a relatively small unit. So like I said, in this video we're going to be putting it together all the way from opening the boxes to demonstrating its use. Let's get started. Since I ordered my sander, it was delivered and showed up on a box truck. Luckily the driver was a pretty nice guy and he helped me carry all the relatively heavy boxes around to the basement. All the stuff for the sander showed up bundled onto a pallet, but once you unbundle it you get multiple packages, which are the closed base, the main part of the unit, the conveyor belts, and then these extra boxes were accessories that I got, which are the in-feed and out-feed tables, a digital readout, and then I think in the small box is sandpaper. A lot can happen to a piece of equipment in shipping, but this sander was packed very nicely in multiple boxes and strapped down to the pallet. The assembly on the base is made to be a little bit easier because they welded on all the nuts onto the insides of the holes, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that. That keeps you from having to fiddle around and flip the piece around as much to hold the actual nut still when you're tightening up the bolt. And then for those of you who see it sort of as a downside that you have to assemble the base at all, my thinking is that the shipping costs would have probably been significantly higher if the base would have been all one piece. So I think it's worth that 5 or 10 minutes that it's going to take to assemble it. Putting the base together is about as simple as it gets. You just line up the holes and tighten up the bolts, and it turned out to be quicker than I thought. The base only ended up taking about 2 or 3 minutes to put together, and that's even with filming it. So the little door just pops open. I really like that. It's even got a little piece of weather stripping in there. I imagine that's to keep it from rattling. And it only took about 2 or 3 minutes, like I said, and that is all because of those nuts being welded in instead of having to put them in yourself. And the floor pan goes in first, 4 bolts on each corner. Same for the back panel, and then the front of the cabinet just bolts on in each corner. And you want to just hand tighten those at first to where everything lines up, and then you can tighten them all down in the end. With the stand assembled, you want to put the main part of the unit up on the stand, but first you're going to want to remove the little plywood pieces they have attached to the bottom of the sander. And it's a heavy unit, so get a friend. Do not try this at home. Just a tip, when you call up your friend to come help you, you shouldn't start out the conversation with, "I need you to come help me pick up something really heavy." Luckily, I have my 2 helpers, lefty and righty, that helped me hulk it up onto the base. But it was rather heavy and a kind of an awkward thing to pick up. It was smooth sailing from here, and everything else was fairly simple. The first step is bolting the drum unit down to the base. You do that from inside the cabinet, then attach the little knob for raising and lowering the head. The next step is attaching the conveyor belt that's in its own box and has the motor attached. You just slide that under the drum and then flip up the little lever, hand tighten down some screws, drop the left-hand side over the studs, and tighten them down. With the conveyor belt snugged down, you want to go ahead and install the support tables. This gives support to your lumber that kind of cantilevers out to the left of the head. You start out by installing the studs, slip the table over those studs, and then tighten it down. Then you align the rollers with the conveyor belt with a straight edge. One of the accessories that I got was a digital readout, also known as a DRO, and it comes with specific hardware for mounting it to this sander. This is the digital readout that is also used on portable planers like the DeWalt's and Delta models. You need to first peel off these little adhesive pieces on the back of the DRO and attach it to the bracket that comes with it. And then there are some little screws you need to remove and then replace and then attach, and it's all in the instructions. It's pretty easy to go by, although the digital readout is probably the most complicated thing in putting the sander together, but it's really not all that bad. It mounts to one of the motor mounting bolts and then to the face of the raising and lowering part of the sander, and there it is installed, and you can see that it even angles the screen towards the user of the tool, so that's extra nice. The next step is getting the actual extension tables mounted. These are also an accessory that I got, which is really helpful for longer and heavier pieces of lumber. If you have limited space, you can do without them, or you can get them and then take them on and off as needed. They're pretty easy to adjust, so it's not too big of a deal to remove them when you're not needing them. The mounting brackets bolt on, and then the actual tables slip onto those brackets and then are adjustable, and you can use a straight edge to get them nice and level. Well, it turned out to be much easier to assemble the sander than I thought, and for that I am very happy. The trickiest thing was probably putting on the digital readout. That was just me not being able to follow the instructions quite right, but once I realized that there was a diagram on the back of the paper, it made it much easier to know which way that the brackets were supposed to be held on there. And then the hardest thing would be putting the main part of the sander up on the base. That was pretty heavy. Should have had help with that, but I was kind of in a hurry to get it on there. So let's go ahead and take some test passes over some cherry. Real quick before I crank on the dust collector and it gets loud in here, I want you to see how quiet the machine is just when it's running. So first we'll flip on just the motor. And so that's driving the drum. You can see it spinning. And then when you crank on the conveyor belt, that's a little louder, but it's because it has a little gearbox on it. So that's full speed. So that's what the machine sounds like when it's not sanding. Of course, it's going to be a little noise when it sands, but it's nice that it's that smooth running. Not a lot of explanation is needed, but in general, a thickness sander is similar to a thickness planer, but instead of a cutter head with blades, it has sandpaper wrapped around a drum. So you're not going to be able to take as heavy of a cut that you would with a planer, but it's surprising how fast it actually removes material. I'd say the heaviest cuts that I successfully took with this sander were almost a 1/16 of an inch, which that is definitely on the heavy side, but just in general it's going to sand a lot faster than you'd be able to do so by hand. And another advantage is the flatness. You're not going to sand in sort of dished out areas like you might by hand sanding or using a orbital sander, for example. So on that piece of cherry, I first started out by making some pencil marks as a reference and then quickly sanded it down to a smooth surface. This is 80 grit paper in the machine now. This piece of oak was resawn on my bandsaw, so starting out with that bandsaw texture, I quickly removed it and sanded this piece down to less than 1/8 of an inch. So it's a pretty great little machine for creating thin material for making, say, small boxes, or even creating a sort of a true veneer for your furniture projects. One important thing to note is that this sander works great with even a small dust collector. This is one of the small Harbor Freight models. Well, that wraps up the assembly of the new drum sander, and I'm pretty excited about it. I'm looking forward to putting it into use here in the shop coming up very soon. Starting off, I've got a couple of chair designs that I've really been wanting to make, and then a coffee table here for the house that I was going to be using it for. Those are the things sort of right off the bat, and then I've got some long-term things that I really want to work on that are sort of more on the business side of my woodworking. Machines like this and the new bandsaw that I got are the things that are going to be able to make me be able to move efficiently through certain projects to make them feasible for me to make and keep them at a price point where people are going to be able to buy them. So really looking forward to it, and there'll be more on that in the future. The next videos on the machine are going to probably be on certain adjustments that I might need to make on it. If there aren't any adjustments, I might hold off on that video until I do have to make adjustments, changing paper, that kind of thing. And then down the road, once I've had it long enough to really form a solid opinion based on actual experience, I'll do a review on the tool itself. So just be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and you'll be able to follow along with those videos. And if you are in the market on this machine and you've got any specific questions in the meantime, you can ask me those and I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more from me in the future, click the red button on the screen now and you'll get updates when I post future videos. Thanks for watching. With 1 or 2 helpers, place sanding unit on stand.